I am delighted to be joined now by Guinness ambassador Brian O'Driscoll, who is reminding fans that the Guinness Six Nations isn't over with the opening fixture of the Guinness Women's Six Nations taking place this weekend. This season, Guinness and Brian O'Driscoll are calling on Irish rugby fans to show their support for the Women's Championship by purchasing tickets to the matches. To purchase tickets to the Guinness Women's Six Nations, you can visit irishrugby.ie/Ireland/tickets. Brian, it's a pleasure having you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And as I said, just in that intro there, I suppose that's the message we have to get out, is that the Six Nations isn't over and there's some big matches for this women's team ahead.
Yeah, there sure are. I think, it's been very well documented where the women's game has come from in the last couple of years. The disappointment of not making the World Cup in New Zealand back in 2022. But the positivity around the increased investment, the professional contracts, new coaching ticket, new energy seems to be in the squad. So it's never more important to a team when things aren't going brilliantly or haven't gone brilliantly in the past. That's when teams need the support most. It's easy to be a fair weather supporter. It's when the going's been a bit tough or when the results haven't quite gone your way that's actually when you need people coming to watch you and cheer you on. I have to say, last year for the England game in is it Virgin Media Park now down in Musgrave, okay, it was a loss, but being in the stand, the positivity from the supporters there right till minute 80 was brilliant and exactly what players feed off. And it's a building phase, no doubt. There's a lot of change happened, and I think all they're looking at is improvement on what they delivered. Back in XV3, okay, they didn't want to be in that competition, maybe didn't play against some rugby strongholds, but ultimately it's about continued improvement and then hopefully starting to pick off some victories and a good opportunity in this Six Nations, certainly to get a win or two if they can play well.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Just to pick up what you were saying there, I mean, like when you were playing, you obviously, like, the support from the sidelines and the terrace was vital. So getting the venues packed out for these games will be a massive help to the Irish team.
Well, as a player, be it a club player or an international player, ultimately you're a showman or a showwoman, and you want to go and play in front of as many people as you can, and you want to have that support, particularly at home. I think if you look at what the Red Roses did last year against France in Twickenham, nearly 60,000 people, it's exceptional. Now they're in a different trajectory on their cycle. They've been professional for a number of years. They've been continually very high performers. We're at a very different position on our cycle, but nonetheless you still need that level of support to get behind you, to get young boys and girls seeing their heroes, elevate some of our sevens players that have had success coming back to 15s, getting showing them their superstars in close proximity. I think going from Cork to Belfast to Dublin is all important to generate a countrywide supporter base. So for me, it's an exciting time, and it's definitely a building phase with new coaching ticket and new players and new co-captains coming in. So there's a lot to be excited about, and I think a huge part of that is just the support that they get from the general public.
Yeah, certainly so. And as you mentioned, the new coaching ticket, Scott Beeman coming in last summer, with a big job ahead of him, considering, I suppose, where Ireland were last year, Six Nations, obviously not ideal with 5 defeats, some of those heavy defeats as well. So he has a big job on his hands to build things up. But even just from listening to the players in their press conferences this week, there seems to be a massive sense of optimism around the camp.
Yeah, and I think any coach coming in has a master plan. But I suppose sometimes you have to, that is tweaked depending on personnel, depending on skill sets, depending on confidence levels, and you can't go from 0 to 100. You've got to put building blocks in place. It definitely feels as though this team is in a position of needing to build some good foundations to make sure that they get better, game on game and year on year. This won't be fixed overnight. It's going to be a bit of a process, but in doing so, that they're able to feel as though the environment is good, that there's a feel-good factor in camp, and that they are getting, improved resources, which is undoubtedly the case in the last couple of years. In fairness to Kevin Potts, since he's come in as CEO of the IRFU, there's been a massive focus on the women's game, on pathways, on professional contracts being issued at 15s for the first time, quality strength and conditioning, wraparound components to that makes any team a success, or gives any team a chance of success. So I think we're going in the right direction, but people need to be patient with it.
Yeah, and for the players as well. And I suppose for a new coach comes in, he needs buy-in from those players. And it looks like Scott has gotten that, and it looks like they're all united behind him.
Yeah, and listen, I'm not going to go back to the negativity around obviously letters going into government. I think lots needed to be fixed. What was going on behind the scenes, but also I think a bit of ownership as well, and responsibility within the squad, and I think that environment, with personnel and with the conversations that they've had internally, feels as though it's going in the right direction. And listen, I've been involved in teams that the culture has been very questionable, and it's so hard to build any form of momentum when people are at one another or there's finger pointing. So once you get a positive message that Scott is clearly consistently giving to them around where they're going, the direction they want to be in, the timeline for it, and also continuing to improve as individuals and as a collective. They're learning skills. They're getting the coaching that they're clearly responding well to. So all of that is going to create a very positive environment, and particularly when you feel as though more of those resources are being put towards your continued development. All of that is going to add towards the feel-good factor within any squad. And when you feel good and you feel as though you've got a fighting chance, it's when you're going to play better rugby.
Heading to France, though, this weekend, not an easy place to go at any level. France beat Ireland comfortably last year and the year before as well. So on paper, this is a huge, huge task for Ireland this weekend, Brian.
Yeah, it is. I saw Scott talk about we need to fire some shots. I don't necessarily think anyone expects the women's team to go over there and beat a pretty impressive French team. They were World Cup semi-finalists a couple of years ago, consistently second best in the Six Nations over the last 6 or 7 years. We've had a tough against them in recent times, but all of these fixtures give an opportunity. If you go over and think, oh well, lambs to the slaughter, well, that's going to be the outcome. I think you have to go over there and find a way to, even in defeat, if that's what's coming, even in that, you have to find some ways of keeping the scoreline down, or feeling as though you've pressured them or made them force errors, be it defensively or frailties in attack as well. All of that will add to the confidence levels going forward. I think the expectation, I'm not speaking for them internally, but I think the expectation is that we've got a far greater opportunity of winning one of the games that we have at home. France and England away this year is not the more favoured route to playing to gaining victories. So we need to think and focus on Dublin, Cork, or Belfast, of picking up hopefully at least that victory, maybe a couple of victories in that regard, and hopefully, like I said, it's just a momentum piece around building on some of the good work that happened late last year.
Yeah, Ireland's first home game against Italy at the RDS on Sunday, March 31st. Fingers crossed, a massive crowd for that. And I'd imagine Scott is going to be targeting that game as the game to say, look, lads, we have a real shot at getting a win here.
Yeah, and you want to give the same focus to every game, but the reality is human nature, and particularly when I've been involved in teams that be huge underdogs, and you always have to think that there's a possibility of an upset, but there are certain games that as a team, be it club or country, that you will target a little bit more, that you'll really fancy your chances, and they won't hold anything in reserve from this weekend, but that definitely feels as though there's a huge opportunity. If we can get a good crowd and a good supporter base down to the RDS and get people in behind them and start well, that's half the job done.
Yeah, fingers crossed indeed. So what would be a good tournament for Ireland, do you think, Brian? Is it too simplistic to say just not getting the wooden spoon this year is going to be a good year
Yeah,
for Ireland?
I think. Do you know what? You look back on 5 losses last year. A win is an improvement. All you're looking for is improvement. This is not going to be a very quick fix. You're not going to be all of a sudden competing with France and England overnight. This is going to take 3, 4, 5, 6 years of constant development and reinforcement and resources and all the things that I mentioned. So, I think getting a second victory would be amazing as well. Obviously, if you finish third in the competition, you're going to qualify for the World Cup, which is a huge goal for our women's team, having missed out last time round. So I think, there's no harm in having those aspirations, but I think a victory or two would certainly be a step in the right direction.
It's all about exposure as well, Brian. 'Cause I mean, like the exposure that this team and I suppose women's sport in general over the last few years, it's been growing and growing and growing, which I suppose is a massive help. So the more eyes on this team, the better.
And also the media coverage as well. I think that's the beauty of the standalone tournament. We're into season 3 of it now, and maybe in the past, from a coverage perspective, it was lost, amongst the men's senior team and at times even the men's under 20s. So to have it stand alone, you're reading way more about your big name players, many of which are coming back from the Seventh Circuit where they've had success. Hopefully the injection of confidence that they will bring into the environment will have a positive knock-on effect to others. So yeah, I think it's the fact that Guinness have come in now and been title sponsors for both men's and women's. I think all of it is about shining a light on attendance, on about media coverage, on interest levels, and sometimes it's cart before the horse. Maybe the results haven't been quite what we would have hoped for, but there's a distinct possibility of this team getting better year on year now that we have the foundations in place and the resources in place. So I think the big thing is about trying to get in and support our team as much as we can. And the beauty of that is we're going to get a game in 3 of the 4 provinces in the country. And so people will have an opportunity to see some of these big name players delivering at home.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, those games coming up at the RDS, Virgin Media Park, and at Kingspan Stadium over the next few weeks. Get your tickets, irishrugby.ie/Ireland/ticket for those games in the Guinness Women's Six Nations. Finally, Brian, just before I let you go, because you're on a Cork radio station, I can't let you go without talking about a certain Cork man who may have played his last game for Ireland last week. And if it was to be Peter O'Mahony's last game in an Ireland shirt, like what can you say about him? He bows out as an absolute legend.
Yeah, he sure does. You look at the success that he's had. When he came in over a decade ago, is it his 5th Six Nations title, a couple of Grand Slams, countless victories against the best teams in the world, be it England, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa. He's been an incredible performer for Ireland for a number of years, and continually kind of coming back when people had begun to write him off. And listen, only he knows when it's the time is right to exit stage left. We can all have an opinion, but in your bones when it's a good time or whether you feel as though there's a little bit more in the tank. And so we'll leave it to him. But yeah, he's been a brilliant servant for Munster and Ireland over his career. Constantly turned up for big moments in big games, clutch moments, which is what you want from any leader in any side. So I suppose we'll wait and see what decision comes his way. But you'd imagine that you could do with him down in South Africa at the same time. So maybe we'll hang on to him until
he might be.
After
we might
the
convince
summer.
him. He might twist his arm. Brian, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today, sir. Thanks very much for joining us.
Good man. Thanks a lot. Cheers, Rory.